your kids will get hate for being part of a wealthy family. Most people don't want to talk about this either because it's not relevant to their situation or they don't want to deal with the uncomfortable truths around this. Now, this isn't about complaining or positioning your kids as victims because, yeah, it might suck to get hate because you're wealthy, but positioning yourself as a victim is coming from a stance of weakness. And I think it's important to come from a stance of strength. And also, you are experiencing good fortune, and this is a negative side to it. But you can overcome some of those negatives if you're prepared and you prepare your kids. The reality is that wealth can solve potentially all your financial problems, but it also introduces some social and psychological ones. So let's break down where the hate comes from, what it looks like, and what you can do about it to make things better for your family. So this hate that they might experience could come from individual experiences all the way to like broad cultural narratives. I saw it growing up, kids comparing lifestyles, and I'm sure that the parents also contributed to that. You might have your kids' friends at their own home hearing the parents talk about how you might have a nice house or that you make a lot of money, and they're probably just making assumptions. They don't know any of the actual facts in most cases, but the kids hear it and then they repeat those things amongst your own kids. And that subtle resentment you might have seen will trickle through amongst a social network. And social media probably doesn't help the situation either. Then you can step further into just broader cultural shifts. Obviously, there's a lot of people who will say, rich people are feeding off of the labor of others. Wealth creates an unfair advantage that other people can't overcome. There's plenty of narratives like that. There's also the opposite too. But the point is that your kids may be hearing all of these things and having this sometimes subtle, sometimes in your face resentment thrown at them constantly could be psychologically damaging. So what this looks like is you might be hearing comments like, must be nice, ... Or, of course you have that. Maybe even some backhanded compliments. They might feel some social exclusion. Maybe people are actually confronting them on this, like saying, did you actually earn this yourself? Or you're only successful because of your parents, or you only have the opportunity because of your parents. And as they get older, they may even find that they are skeptical about their other relationships. It could be their romantic relationships or their friendships. They might be asking themselves, like, does this person actually like me or just like my lifestyle or the potential to get something out of me? So it can create this negative feedback loop where they're asking themselves these kind of harmful questions. And then internally, they might be feeling like they're being judged all the time or that they have to prove themselves constantly. I know I felt that way as a kid in a neighborhood with nice homes. Friends might come over and visit. They might say something. They did say something pretty regularly. And even still today, I feel like I have to constantly prove myself just because my dad owned a business that made good money. So the real risk here is if your kids start to internalize all these externalities, like feeling guilty about the good fortune that they have, and they might try to downplay their background or even overcompensate by being super high performers or super high achievers, maybe even having some perfectionism. That's something I've seen with a lot of peers and felt myself. And then there's the opposite approach, which wasn't my experience, and it's not something I see as often, but it certainly does happen, where someone leans into the entitlement or becomes super defensive and will just cut people out who throw them any kind of challenge to who they are. So this could come into play as someone who spends a ton of money or who even cuts out people who are different from them in their relationships. So as a parent, what can make this worse are a few things. One is just avoiding the topic entirely. If you don't talk to your kids about it, then they're going to have to figure it out themselves, and you're kind of letting the randomness of the world dictate what could happen to them. Another problem would be overshielding them from the reality. They are going to have to deal with snide comments or what people think about them. You can't change what people think about you, but protecting someone from it to a fault can be a huge problem. Giving them the tools to succeed is better than just insulating them from the realities of the world. You may even feel the need to overcorrect. So creating artificial hardships, my own extended family, I became aware recently of a situation where someone was made to deal with some pretty harsh artificial hardships because they needed to learn a lesson. So here's what I think actually helps in this situation. Normalizing it early is going to be super helpful. When they're young and they're still developing their sense of self, if you're fortunate enough to have reached this point while your kids are still young, then that's a great time to talk about it before they start to experience it. You let them know, like, hey, some people aren't going to treat you kindly, and this is why, and it's okay. That happens. That's going to go a long way as opposed to just ignoring it. And it's important to mitigate this by saying that, like some people are just going to misunderstand you. Like they're going to say these things. They don't actually know what's going on. They're just making assumptions, and help them realize they can let it slide off their shoulder, especially when they know what they're saying is clearly untrue. Another great thing you can do is help them build their identity separate from the wealth. So emphasizing their effort, their character, their contributions to the world, or even just to the family. Those are all great ways to build self-esteem and have it not be tied to wealth. And even better is encouraging activities where the outcomes can't be bought. So things like sports, some element of academics, people will still say like, oh, you have better equipment. Oh, maybe you have a better tutor. But if you still play the game or you take the test, you still have to show up and do the work and complete the task at hand. Another one that I really loved, it was the best thing for me, was being a part of scouting. People might care how wealthy you are. Ultimately, if you don't show up and do the work there, you're not going to advance. No one's going to give you a free pass, at least not regularly. The other thing to talk about is the social aspect, having the awareness that people are going to have much different financial situations than you, and to have respect for everyone is super important. Teach them to avoid tone-deaf behavior, and then having some gratitude for the good things that happen in life without attaching it to guilt. You also want to prepare them for the comments. You're going to get a ton of them, I'm sure. So practicing with them, giving them language, helping them develop a calm and confident tone that they can deliver back, that's all going to go a long way. And it's going to be really hard because everyone acts emotionally at any age. Just teaching them some strategies for not how to react so emotionally, and just take a deep breath and step back from the situation before you respond can go so much further than just immediately responding without thinking about how you want to convey yourself. Another great thing is creating some real responsibility that they have control over. So obvious things would be like chores, homework, taking care of certain tasks, letting them fail if the consequences aren't absolutely critical. If they forget their equipment bag or they forget to bring something to school, like let them live with those consequences. Having that accountability is super important to developing their sense of self and then protecting them against what other people are going to say. Another really useful thing you can do is teach them that not everything is solved with money. When I was a kid, my dad would basically say, we'll just pay someone to fix that. There was no attempt even to try to fix a problem like in our house ourselves. And that was a really bad thing to learn. It completely shaped my life, and it didn't have to be that way. So teaching and showing kids how to solve problems themselves before you start using your financial resources will go a super long way to developing confidence, responsibility, and just general life skills. Now, when they're building their confidence, you also want to watch out for the scale tipping too far where they become arrogant. That's definitely going to create resentment amongst the people that they know. So you don't want them to be apologetic for their life. You don't want them to feel entitlement on the other side. It's got to have a balance. You want them to be comfortable in their own reality while respecting the realities of all the other people around them. And in the long term, you're not just raising your kids, you're raising future stewards of wealth. And if you're fortunate enough, your kids will also have their own kids, and you'll want them to pass along these same characteristics and skills to them so that you have multi-generational success. And their relationship with money is going to shape their kids' relationship with money. You can have this compounding effect that will allow all the good things that you have to cascade over future generations. So yeah, your kids are going to get hate for being rich, but that in and of itself is not the tragedy. That's the reality. The tragedy is being unprepared for it. You can't control how the world reacts to your family, but you can control how your kids are equipped to handle it.